Hello, hello. I hope my voice holds up for this. Um, this is quite a chapter. Um, it's a chapter that requires you to go back and look at other chapters. Rescorla and Wagner will come up. Lots of things will come up, even going back to chapter one. And it's a thoughtful chapter, and I feel his pain because I think we are sort of age mates, and he went uh, through these discoveries about when I did. And, here's our summary. Everything you know is wrong. Uh, how special is taste aversion or flavor aversion? Uh, evolution, which I'm a fan of, and we've touched on that before. And oddly, well, maybe not oddly, a whole bunch of stuff on honeybee learning. Um, I can't offer you much help here other than to say, I feel your pain. And the textbook at one point says your head must be spinning at this point. And yeah, uh, this chapter makes heads spin. What can you do? Um, so what are those tabs down there? Ew, what's that? Whatever that is, I don't want it. We go back to Watson and Thorndike and pigeons and Skinner boxes, and the terms we use as if uh, learning is very generalizable. Skinner was a big believer in that you could generalize from one species or behavior to another without much trouble. Um, that's not widely believed these days. How do I make this go away? What is it? That's better. Um, yeah, and laws of learning were general was strongly challenged in the 60s and 70s. And that's about when I got into the field. And taste aversion learning, poison avoidance, it has many terms. John Garcia uh, was a major mover and shaker in that. And this guy is a smarter version of me, talking about Vietnam, civil rights. Uh, things were happening back in those days. And Fire Sign Theater, you probably haven't heard of it, but it it I don't even know if it still exists, but it was quite funny. Uh, everything you know is wrong. So I'm sure I mentioned that when Garcia started this, uh, he was not welcomed. Uh, this did not look like class, classical conditioning to the classical conditioning crowd, and long delay learning. Right, uh, we were in the eye blink period or conditioned emotional responses, and CSUS intervals of less than a second were what we thought was best. And then Garcia comes along and talks about sometimes over an hour. Uh, and so that took some getting used to. He had trouble getting his stuff published for quite a while. The evolution starts rearing its head. That was certainly not a big theme in my training. as an undergraduate or even in graduate school. But the idea that learning is an evolved mechanism, and it's evolved to deal sometimes with fairly specific things, and certainly learning to avoid poisons is an important skill for an organism to have. And there's a quote. There's a line here. Skinner boxes with arbitrary stimuli and responses. Skinner wrote an article, The Arbitrary Nature of the Operant. He really did believe it was, you just pick anything off the shelf and the laws of learning would apply. But the poison avoidance, taste aversion, threatened that. And Martin Seligman, uh, 70. So that was about when I started graduate school. And he, tried to throw a monkey wrench in or a spanner in, saying that, maybe things weren't as generalizable as we thought. And the concept of things being prepared or unprepared for some things, uh, there's truth to that. And certainly, you remember the research with Garcia and the bright, noisy, tasty water and shock versus illness. That indicated a preparedness for some kinds of associations, but not for others. And it's interesting to see Khaled in here. He's apparently an age mate too. He writes a Fundamentals of Psychology book, and he was big on this stuff. And there's Damian again, my former book with the kissing elephant. Um, and it's important to know whether what you're studying generalizes to other things. And you know, some things about taste aversion learning or flavor aversion learning um, have been thought to be relatively unique, and there's a list of them, and then for each one, he goes over whether it's really as special as it looks. And one trial learning, you remember eye blink conditioning in rabbits, very, very slow learning, but poison avoidance, taste aversion, flavor aversion, can happen robustly in one trial. And of course, if you're thinking about evolution, I mean, how many times do you get to die? If you just ate something toxic, you better not do that again. Um, and there's flavor aversion, and saccharin is common here because sugar is a nightmare to have in the lab. It gets over everything and sticky. And Garcia started his research using radiation because the feds thought that we would be having nuclear exchanges with commies, and they wanted to know what radiation would do to our soldiers. So at first, his work was with radiation, and of course, that's relevant to radiation therapy. But now almost all the research is done with lithium, and lithium produces aversion. And there's Boughton, 1996. So there's a difference between testing a day later and 28 days later, but so there's some spontaneous recovery there. And Then, of course, trouble. Is it really unique? And he discusses research arguing that under certain conditions, uh, you can get one trial learning with other things. Fear is another type of conditioning where one trial learning can happen quite a bit. But few people consider this strong grounds for arguing the taste aversion or example of qualitatively different form of learning. So that one he knocks down. And then there's long-term learning, the delay between the CS and the US. Um, and there's a huge discussion here uh, that not much goes on uh, between the initial taste and the second taste. And we've already talked about proactive and retroactive interference. And you know, here you've got preference for saccharin, which the rats do like, and there's a lot of licks on those test trials. Um, and if you throw in vinegar instead of saccharin, you can weaken the training. So that suggests that the strong long-term conditioning is at least in part due to the fact that you're not eating much in between. And there's lots of other research discussed in here relevant to that. I had taste aversion to Pringles potato chips. Uh, and boy, it was grim. I had the flu and I wasn't eating much, and my mom was shopping and she said, "Oh, what would you like, Timmy?" And I said, "Oh, I've seen these commercials for Pringles potato chips." And because I had the flu, I wasn't eating much, so I ate the chips and got nauseous from the flu. I cognitively knew it was the flu, but I had a vicious aversion to Pringles for a while after that. And there's a nice discussion there about what you do with the animals between. And again, the conclusion is long delay learning is not necessarily restricted to taste aversion. Learn safety, uh, that down below, Khaled and rosin, rat given a taste of sucrose at 4 o'clock and made ill at 4:30, strong aversion. Not as strong is if the animal had had saccharin about 12. Uh, so if you have something hours ago and you don't get sick, it's probably safe. And so that's a nice little demonstration and discussion. Um, and there's a nice discussion again about the safety and counter conditioning, and he showed that pre-exposure to X before A plus and AX minus conditioning, which should have boosted safety learning, actually interfered with safety learning. This doesn't make sense if pre-exposure causes safety, but pre-exposure to a taste causes latent inhibition, which we've also heard about. Um, and then there's again clever research by Cowlett and rosin with interfering tastes, arguing that exposure to the second flavor knocked the prime out of short-term memory uh, and made it surprising again. So there's when things are learned best. So you have time is the fourth arrow, but you have three training conditions: normal training, one where there's a second, the flavor is given earlier, and you don't you consume more vinegar, and then if there's a second flavor thrown in, you consume less. So predicted by Wagner's short-term memory model of conditioning. Uh, so you can see that you're being taken all over the book in this chapter and made to think deep thoughts. Hedonic shift. One of your peers got his PhD and did his research on hedonic shifts. He's a neuroscientist and he does recordings, and this is really interesting. And again, there's cleverness with how rats react to different kinds of tastes, yum behaviors and yuck behaviors. Um, so you can, of course, you can't see the animal thinking, but you can see an output of what's going on in the animal. And so when sucrose is paired with illness, they begin to respond to it as if it's bitter. Just right out of the box, rats like sucrose, but you associate it with illness, and they start reacting to it as if it's a different hedonic value. And there's Linda Parker, and I've highlighted Tony Sclafani because he was leaving UCLA as I came to UCLA. Very clever researcher, built a lot of neat equipment, and her research is important. And again, notice that they're using lithium. Um, and more talking. And, it's not all hedonic shift. And he doesn't like broccoli. I forgot there was a president, I think, who didn't like broccoli. He wouldn't allow it to be served in the White House. So it's not simple. Nothing, unfortunately, is simple. A taste aversion is rather visceral and non-cognitive. And I've already alluded to that with me. I mean, I knew I had the flu. I knew I vomited because of the flu, not Pringles. But boy, you could not convince my gut of that. Oh, there's Rescorla and Holland, names we've seen before. Um, it so it's complicated. There hasn't been a lot of done work on these paradigms in taste aversion learning, but taste aversions are not revalued the same way. Um, the so it's uh, there is an element of hedonic shift, but it's not the not the whole story. There's I've highlighted Fanzelo. Actually didn't know he did this kind of stuff, but he's a fear guy now, and one of your peers did her doctoral dissertation with him, and he's very bright too. Um, and there's our friend the eye blink, which we learn or bunnies learn very slowly. Uh, so U.S. deflation, which we've heard about before, works with first order conditioning, but not with second order conditioning, and we heard of those before. Um, and it doesn't seem to be work with you can get it to work with auto shaping in pigeons, which we've seen before. Um, so, and this will come back later is, are we learning SSs or SRs? Uh, and here we're suggesting it can be either. And then here's the fairly famous Garcia research with compound stimuli. And this fed into Seligman's um, preparedness. This is a very clever design. So in the top, you have a plastic spout where the water or saccharin, which of course is mostly water, and the odorant are mixed together. And as you know, when you consume food, you smell it by taking it in. But in the second design, which is so clever, they have a little cup around the spout, and they only put the odorant in the cup, so it's a pure smell, not uh, a mixture with the other. And you can see that there's a lot fewer licks with the OT trials. So I that's so clever. I'm very impressed with that. Um, all the models considered in Chapter 4 predict that when a salient CS is compounded with a weaker, it should cause overshadowing. The CS should reduce associative strength. Um, all the models we've considered predict competition and overshadowing rather than potentiation of odor to the taste. So, wicked clever research. Rossiniak, I think I used to play softball with him. Yeah, that's why he's there. Um, gut defense, skin defense, again, preparedness is an issue here. Within compound association, two elements are put together. That's Rescorla again. Uh, extinction of taste, odor conditioning, reduced aversion to the odor. Uh, so we're doing the whole book. You really have to flip back and forth to appreciate this chapter. Although within compounding associations may sometimes be involved in potentiation, they are not sufficient. So uh, they're they can contribute, but they alone will not do it. Um, it. And then there's the bottom line. What appears to matter is the weak conditionability of the target stimulus is important. The CS doesn't get as much attention as it should. It's a very important variable. And Rescorla and Wagner, you'll remember, had a included CS in their theory. It doesn't get what the attention it deserves. So in the end, the 70s and 80s passed. I had left learning and gone into pain research, um, and I was shocked when I came back to start teaching this course 20, 30 years later, how mainstream taste aversion had come. And there's a little dig here at Seligman. Chicken Little Seligman was wrong. The sky never fell, which of course is good. That makes the people who spend their lives researching this um, uh, are certainly not wasting their time. They're providing valuable information. Taste aversion learning added a fresh biological and functional perspective to how we view conditioning. It not did not lead to reinvention of the wheel. It led to a better wheel. Yeah, this guy, he lived it. And then there's now a discussion of evolution and some terms you should know. It's and X-aptation is an important concept in evolution, and it's discussed very nicely here. Gould, I sort of had anger issues with Gould. Bus Hazelton, one of your students, almost worked with Hazelton. Um, so the idea that something can evolve for one purpose, and having evolved for that purpose, evolution can, in effect, say, oh, you can now do this with that. And yeah, feathers are and flight is a common theme. Birds are surviving dinosaurs, and there's evidence that early feathers were there not to fly with, but to help you stay warm. And that as the feathers became longer, they could be used for signaling and they could be colored. And then if they were long enough, you could glide with them. And so, something evolved to keep you warm, then becomes something that helps you fly. And we're coming up on the bees, yes. So, not the learning things, but birds can fly and bees can fly. But boy, they are not the same thing. Uh, they are analogous rather than homologous. They evolved separately. Just take a look at a bee, take a look at a bird. They both can be used to fly, but their evolutionary history is quite different. And yes, I usually carry a Swiss Army knife with me. Um, and I just read a popular book where this Swiss Army knife concept is still there. Uh, there may be modules, which makes cognitive people very happy. Uh, Not too many people carry Swiss Army knives, but they have a million little things in there. Not a million. I think mine has 20 that you can use for different purposes. And there's preparedness again in the fear module, and fear should make us think about Fanslow. He studied that a lot. And there's Wagner again. And you'll remember group correlated, group uncorrelated conditions. You really cannot read this chapter without flipping back and forth. And the bottom line is this group showed better learning to X, even though it was paired equally often with US, because A and B were not more informative. Uh, and that's old stuff from Wagner. And classical conditioning again. um, and then there's some human stuff where humans have to decide what illness you have. And this is, uh, the validity experiments in rabbits, humans, and honeybees, they're coming. And you can see that responses are weaker to the correlated than to the uncorrelated. And those data come from 68 through 83. So and there's a discussion of that data set. And the bee research is very clever. There we go. You hang out in your lab and you put feeders at the window, and you can have colors and tastes, and you capture the bees and you paint dots on their backs so you can tell who they are. Uh, and there's a bee happily consuming sucrose. Uh, on a says it's a petri dish. Doesn't look like a petri dish. Oh yeah, no, I see the petri dish. Um, so you can do very clever things here, and see if bees can see color arguably better than we can. And you can have compound stimuli. Oops, I may have hit twice. Let me just go back and check. Yes. Bitterman was the that head of the lab that did all that stuff. And again, you've seen these designs before, correlated, uncorrelated, uh, and evolution. Again, the honeybee is especially interesting because the bee's brain evolved separately from the brains of vertebrates, as the common ancestor of humans and honeybees uh, might have had only one synapse, virtually none at all. So, honeybees and our lineage diverged long ago, but there's remarkable similarities. So there's Gould again. Uh, I'm sorry, I shouldn't be hostile, but he did make me angry. So we're doing associative learning with honeybees and humans, and I'm pretty sure ethologists were discussed before. Konrad Lorenz, Tinbergen, Abel Eibesfeld, Nobel Prize. Uh, they tend to emphasize that learning fine tunes an animal uh, uh, with built-in predilections. In other words, they're sort of prepared to do things, but learning makes it better. And one of your peers went to Australia to study addiction in bees, and he did addiction in ants. They using opiates. Uh, so really interesting research with insects. And even you remember the paradoxical reward effects. Oh, will be covered. I guess it's not. It was mentioned earlier though. Um, that if you switch them from a big reward to a smaller reward, uh, they're not too happy. Um, so negative contrasts, but not goldfish, who are often trotted out as examples of really dumb animals. When I was we our lab animal for a while was the goldfish. They are not too clever, but they can definitely learn stuff. Um, yeah, and the bottom line, despite the occasional difference between bee learning and vertebrate learning, the differences are far outweighed by similarities. And there's Bitterman again. Um, so again, he's being thoughtful. There are similarities, there are differences. It's complicated. Category learning is interesting. We do that a lot in people. Pigeons can do really good category learning, um, and Skinner trained pigeons uh, to guide bombs in World War II. They had to find ships and peck at the ships, and that would guide the fins on the bomb, and it would go into the ship. I don't think that ever got used, but I'll show you pictures eventually. Skinner's going to be big in the next chapter, and here's what used to pass for a video game, and here's blocking effects. And you may never have even seen video games like this, but I certainly spent time playing it. And Rescorla Wagner comes up again. In a normal academic year, I would be making you do Rescorla Wagner over and over. There was a lot of trouble with you know, doing V. A lot of you did delta V, and I warned you that that would be an issue. Um, and a number of you, I would say, didn't get it. It's going to be on the final. It'll definitely be on the final. And now we're looking at things that look a lot like cognitive. You have input units and output units, and this also looks a lot like machine learning. And cognitive psychology and Skinner fought, and largely cognitive has won the field. Um, and Rescorla Wagner still comes up again. You really should go back and try to learn that. And then we're going to have another figure on the next page. Whoops. Yes, this page. Where you can break down the diagram before and break it into different kinds of modules. You won't be drawing this, but again, this looks a lot like machine learning. This is how I have computers try to characterize schizophrenic and non-schizophrenic faces. Also gay straight. Various solutions by the problem that extinction in classical conditioning, maybe someday this will help us with the extinction paradox. Oh my God, look at that. Where now we have hidden units, and the hidden units have, and by the way, at this point, this looks exactly like the outputs that machine learning statistics give us. And that field is heavily integrated with learning and neural networking and stuff. Conditions between these new units and the inputs and outputs can be learned using a modification of the delta rule. Go look at Rescorla and Wagner. Obviously, the author thinks that Rescorla Wagner still has value, as do I. And in the next chapter, we're going to run into someone I like that nobody else does. And I may make you learn something that will make your ears bleed too. Hidden units are good, and they're probably true. You've got billions of neurons in there. Why not have hidden units? Right. Connectionist models like the one just described have largely been developed in the area of human cognition and also neural networking. And he's welcoming the connectionist models. And now we're talking about humans and predicting things. And this also reminds me of nausea. How do humans figure things out? Are we so different that we use different tools? So one of the most well-known or well-studied effects that seems unique to humans is backward blocking. and there's a backward blocking paradigm up there. And Rescorla-Wagner can't handle that one. And contrary to animal conditioning models, humans underrate the predictive value of B when A plus trials either precede or follow the AB trials. And there's some data. So we take reasoning to a higher level, and probabilistic contrast model. There's a discussion there, and then the bottom line is the language might sound familiar because it's exactly how CSUS contingency was proposed back in chapter 3. We are doing the entire book here. If you feel confused, it's because you've lost some of your earlier chapters. Focal sets. Yes. Backward blocking is not as potent as forward blocking, but we still can do it. And Wagner's SOP theory comes back, and they're trying to explain things based on that. And there it is. If your head is spinning a little now. The good thing about this chapter is that it should motivate you to go back and review the earlier chapters, remembering we're having a comprehensive final. A1, A2 rears its head again. If a CS and US are retrieved into A2 at the same time, we should expect a new association. So that's interesting. You thought you'd never see that again, but it's back. So yeah, and clever research. In the next phase, context 1 and almond were paired. Remarkably, the treatment caused the rats to associate the two different cues, peppermint and sucrose, by an increase in preference for the peppermint flavor. And cause and effect. Humans are obsessed with this. They often get it wrong. Astrology is a great example of getting cause and effect wrong. Correlation does not prove causation. And humans are a bit more advanced here. So there's a blocking stimuli and experiment, and blocking did not occur. There was no competition between effects. So that's clever, and humans are clever. And humans are always trying to figure things out. That's one of the things you have to worry when you're about when you're doing research with humans. Have they come up with some theory about what's going on? Improvisational learning. Maybe Pavlov's dogs were able to do it. In fact, most studies of human associative learning accept what is known as dual process. Humans can use rules or propositions to link, but they also link them through conditioning. So, I meant to look this up. Perrochet effect is interesting and surprising, and it's eye blink conditioning again, so it's slow. expectancy ratings. Oh, eye-blink can be done in people too. There was a researcher in Wilkes-Barre doing eye-blink conditioning, and this is really interesting. And you're, and this is the Peruchet effect. On the left, you have eye-blink conditioning going very nicely, but at the same time, you're blinking more. If I ask you to think about it and tell me what you expect, your expectancy is going down. Uh, and yeah, gambler's fallacy. Uh, Casinos love that. We had a student at UCLA, a med student, who was convinced that if a coin was flipped 3 times and it was heads, the odds would shift for the next flip towards tails. We had to give up taking money from him. It was just cruel and unusual punishment. We gave it all back. Um, and this also reminds me of my Pringles effect, that what you know cognitively doesn't have to go with your behavior and how you're acting. And thus, both associative and propositional learning contribute to behavior. And there's another true statement. This chapter has covered many trees, although the forest has been consistent throughout. So yeah, he's a learning theorist, and he's in love with learning theories. There have been good reasons to ask whether the learning principles discovered in Animal Learning Lab generalize, and the answer is yes, they do. Not always perfectly, but certainly more yes than no. And ratcheting is something that's important to evolution. Um, and I suppose I don't know if you've ever used a jack to jack up a car, but that's a ratchet. And you want the car to go up like over a foot maybe to get the tire off the road, but you're given a ratchet that only moves it up like a third to a half an inch or a click. But if you keep adding those together, you get there. And uh, the in terms of evolution, the X adaptation, uh, where you develop feathery things for heat, and then, oh, I got these things. If I make them just a little bit longer, they can help me glide, and if I can glide, I can fly, and yeah. Uh, my preference is to see the differences as things that fine tune general associative processes to their new functions. Right. Oh my God, Kant comes in again. This chapter has considered several Kantian themes. The animal's apparent inborn tendency to associate certain kinds of events in taste experiments is one of them. Cue to consequence effect is a major argument against the tabula rasa. Um, so don't come to look at learning as saying we are tabula rasas and we can do anything. Uh, Learning theorists and Skinner came close to that. Oh no, I hit twice. But it ain't necessarily, it isn't so. So here's the summary. Starting in the 70s, which is about when I went into grad school and learned lots of learning. And there's the taste aversion or poison avoidance and honeybees and causal learning. is important, particularly to us. Um, are humans different? And there's the backward blocking again. And Perrochet effect is really interesting. That what you think is going on, you may not act according to your thoughts, which is something therapists should consider when they're dealing with people. Sometimes the way to get at things is not so much to understand them as it is to do something to get the association changed in the organism. Okay, so I don't envy you that chapter, but it's an important one because it makes you think and it makes you go back through everything in the book up to now. The next chapter has a bunch of stuff I really want to talk about. Um, Skinner, and I guess I'll show you the bombs then too. Um, and Guthrie, which you won't like too much, but I'm going to try it. So thanks for listening. My voice held out. Talk to you next time.